You're a modern gamer that wants to go back and play retro games but don't know where to start? You're a retro gamer that's trying to convince your friends, your kids, anybody that'll listen that retro gaming is classic and can still hold up. I'm here to help pick out a few games across multiple consoles that can get those people that might be a little bit wary of retro gaming right back into the mix. Stick around, let's do it. We've all got those people that don't really think about retro gaming. They're stuck on Warzone, they're stuck on Fortnite, they're playing Among Us for the love of God. But we know that retro gaming is where it's at. But maybe you didn't grow up in the 80s, maybe you didn't grow up in the 90s, and you're trying to go back and figure out what games to play. There are a lot of turds out there, but don't be mistaken. There are so many classics. And today I'm doing a kind of a fun list. I'm gonna give you 16 games, starting with the NES, the original big dog, and moving forward through the PS2, the Xbox, the GameCube generation. I'm going to give you 2 games for each console. I can only pick 1 game per franchise because Mario could dominate this list, Zelda could dominate this list, but I'm going to give you 1 game per franchise, 2 games per console, and that way it comes down to this. If I had to show you just a couple games across multiple retro gaming consoles, they have to be good. Holding up isn't necessarily mean they're still good games. Some games hold up, but I don't have as much fun. These are games that I've played for one, and I still think are fun, and I can show anybody who's never played these games, and I think there's going to be quite a few on here that are fantastic. So let's start off with the NES, and I'm going to go with the easiest game on the system. Super Mario Bros. 3. There's 3 Mario games that graced us on the NES, and all 3 are great, and you could show anybody all 3 games. But if you really want to show someone the one game on the NES that says, this defines the console, this is what it's all about, and this is why this became one of the greatest, if not the greatest consoles in history, is Mario 3. The game does everything that you love about platforming, but it mixes it up with so many fun things. The original Mario's great, but it's very, very basic when you compare it to Mario 2 and Mario 3. And Mario 3 is the icing on the cake for this. So if you want to get someone to retro gaming, show them Mario 3. The next one, the second game on the NES. And there were so many. I know I'm going to have some people that are going to say, oh, come on, you missed this. But hey, 2 per console, and that's it. And this is a puzzle game disguised as a boxing game. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! This game is 100% a puzzle game, a memorization game, and it really shows what gaming back in the late 80s and early 90s is all about. Memorization and consistency. And Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Starts off as an impossible task. And by the time you whoop Tyson, send the baddest dude on the planet down the drain, you realize it wasn't that bad. But in the moment, it's all puzzle. It's dodging, it's moving, it's countering, it's hitting, it's watching for special cues and hitting at the right time. This game is absolutely perfect, and I just beat it for the first time this last year. I've played it a ton, but finally sat down and said, I'm taking out Tyson, and I did it. So Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, an instant classic that I think any gamer could appreciate. We're going to move on to Sega. Now there was the Master System, there was the Atari before Nintendo, but the thing about it, Nintendo started off, and then the Genesis is where Sega really hit their stride. And with the Genesis, you can't play the Sega Genesis without playing Sonic 2. Again, I picked out games on the consoles that are still fun, that still play really well, that my son, who's 9, can play and actually enjoy. And Sonic 2 is amazing for a few reasons. It's fast. It is fast. It's a bit chaotic, but I love that it's actually co-op. It's a co-op game where your buddy, your wife, your kids can take control of Tails, and they essentially cannot die while you're playing the game. And they can help you on offense, they can get rid of enemies in front of you, they can fall off the map, but they just float back down. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is everything the Genesis stands for. It's got blast processing, getting pushed to its max. It has a mascot that's fun, and the co-op aspect of Sonic 2 is absolutely amazing. You can't get out of the 16-bit era without talking about a good old beat 'em up. And what better beat 'em up than Streets of Rage 2 for the Genesis? My second pick on this incredibly popular console. The Genesis had a ton of fantastic games, but Streets of Rage 2 might be one of the best, and they're still making Streets of Rage games to this day, albeit for different consoles. RIP Sega consoles. But that being said, Streets of Rage 2, a classic beat 'em up. Everything we love about the arcades, all the things we love about walking back and forth, beating the living crap out of the enemies, and saving the world. That's what Streets of Rage is all about, but it was probably the best one, I feel like, on that system, and you can't go wrong. It's fun. Kids and adults alike love going back and forth, beating people over the head, and saving the world. Streets of Rage 2, check it out. Going on to the SNES, the Super Nintendo, the Super Famicom, if you're from other parts of the world. And my personal top 5 favorite game of all time rests right here, and that is Mega Man X. Side-scrolling platformers were a huge part of this era of gaming. Every console had tons of them. But Mega Man X took everything you loved about the original series on the NES and moved it forward. And I picked Mega Man X because if I could pick one game per franchise, I'm going to show them this game, and then it's going to branch out, and a retro gamer or a gamer who hasn't played retro games is going to play Mega Man X and go, okay, now I'm going to go back and play Mega Man. And that's why I love the one per franchise rule, because if you play one great game on the franchise, you're going to branch out and play the others. So I don't need to talk about 50 Mega Man games. Mega Man X is the one that I would pick to show a gamer what the SNES was all about. Side-scrolling platforming, great music, amazing boss fights, great storyline, and just an all-out fun gameplay experience. Another one of my favorites on the Super Nintendo is Contra 3: The Alien Wars. Contra 3 did everything right when it came to Contra. It had the side-scrolling, the co-op aspect, amazing boss fights, fast-paced gameplay, good music, fun guns, difficult but attainable, different perspectives with top-down view, which kind of rubs people the wrong way at times. But again, if you want to show someone what the SNES was all about and they love running gun games, you can't beat Contra 3: The Alien Wars. I think this is a great way to showcase what retro gaming is all about in games that we still play. Robert West Game Off the Grid. Speedrunning this bad boy, no death running it. It's still something fun that holds up, and I still play it to this day all the time. Contra 3: The Alien Wars. I know there are quite a few consoles in between, but I'm going to move right into the 64-bit era / 3D era, and we're going to go with the Sony PlayStation. My goodness, what an impact the Sony PlayStation made when it arrived. But I get 2 games. So what 2 games am I going to show a retro gamer or a modern gamer who wants to get into retro gaming? Metal Gear Solid. Visually, it does look a little rough, a little polygonal, a little bit rough around the edges, but the gameplay, immaculate. And once you start playing this game, you ignore what it looks like and you are invested in the storyline. You are invested in Solid Snake and you can't wait to progress. The boss fights, again, incredible. The storyline, awesome. And the gameplay overall did everything right. Metal Gear Solid is one of the greatest games of all time for a reason. And if you show someone who never played a Metal Gear game, I think this is where you might need to start. Fantastic gameplay coming from the PlayStation. Next up, another game that has a ton of games across the franchise, but I only get one. And this game did it best, in my opinion, on the PlayStation 1. Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Castlevania has a bunch of great games. But again, if I want to get someone into the Castlevania franchise, I'm going to show them Symphony of the Night. And they can branch out and play the NES, the Genesis. They can play whatever they want, but they're going to play it on the PS1 first if I want to get them hooked on retro gaming and Castlevania. And I think Symphony of the Night does everything. You beat the game, but it's not over. There's a lot of stuff going on. I can't explain it all. Just know that if you've never played a retro game with Castlevania in the title, this is the way to start. And then branch out and play the other ones first. But this one is one I think everybody can enjoy. We're moving on to a console that I know quite well, that I am quite nostalgic for. But I also know there's a lot of stinkers. Games that may have played well when you were a kid don't always play all that well now. For instance, I'm moving to the N64, and you say, hold on, is it GoldenEye? No. You want to know why? As much as I love GoldenEye, and my nostalgic memories are great, I would never pick GoldenEye for someone that's never played an N64 game or a first-person shooter back in the day. Because the first-person shooters now have been perfect. You can't get better than some of the first-person shooters now with the way the controls are. On the N64, GoldenEye, as fantastic as it was, really rough. So I'm going with some games that I think are still fantastic. And the first one, Banjo-Kazooie. 3D platforming at its best. And the N64 did not have a lot of games. 296. How do I know? Because I'm collecting them all. I'm only a few games away. And by a few, I mean like 60. But we're getting there, okay? We're getting there. But with that, the point is Banjo-Kazooie is a great, all-time great platformer that looks fantastic for the time, but the gameplay holds up, and that's what's important about this list. I want people to go back and play these games if they haven't been into retro gaming, and I want them to enjoy it and go, okay, I get it. And Banjo-Kazooie, it will scratch that itch. It will get that platforming in the 3D aspect knocked out, and it will help move retro gaming forward for those people that might be naysayers. The next one up, a classic. You knew it was coming. This game could have dominated the entire console generation of Nintendo, and I could have put one on every single console, but I couldn't do it. So my one per franchise goes to the Nintendo 64. You know what it is. Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Personally, I love Majora's Mask. I love Majora's Mask, but I know deep down that Ocarina of Time is the better game. And Majora's Mask really just took everything that was great about Ocarina of Time and gave it a new storyline. So the gameplay is the same, and it's just amazing. And the Zelda franchise itself is so confusing with the different timelines, but if you want to get someone to Zelda, we know there's some classics, but Ocarina of Time might be the one to sit them down, let them play it, and get their mind racing, and that will expand to other Zelda games. So my pick for one game per franchise on the N64 is Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Alright, we're moving on, and I'm going to skip the Sega Dreamcast, not because I don't love it, not because I don't appreciate it, because I do. I didn't have it as a kid. I didn't have it growing up, so I can't speak to it from anything other than me going back and playing it as a modern day gamer that loves retro games. So the Dreamcast has some great games, but I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to move on to the PlayStation 2. My favorite console of all time, best-selling console of all time, 1,800 games worth. This is a monster. But I only get 2 games. So what 2 games am I going to pick on the PlayStation 2? This game still holds up. Final Fantasy X. Is it my favorite Final Fantasy game? No. Final Fantasy VII takes the cake, for me personally. But if I want to get somebody into retro gaming, and I want to show them a Final Fantasy game, I'm going to probably move forward a few, and I'm going to show them Final Fantasy X, because visually it's great, the storyline's pretty cool, the graphics and the voice acting at the time were top notch, and it really does still hold up. That's why there's been a million remasters and remakes, and it's across multiple consoles. But originally, the PS2 was king with Final Fantasy X, and it was mind-blowing when it came out, and it still holds up today. Again, they play Final Fantasy X, they like it, I'm going to send them down to 7. I'm going to show them Final Fantasy VIII. But I don't think I'm going to show them those little one-dimensional blockheads from Final Fantasy VII right away. I'm going to give them the Final Fantasy X. So Final Fantasy X has my pick on the PlayStation 2. The next game, and my goodness, this was one of the hardest ones to pick for because the PS2 has so many greats. But again, if I want someone to play a game and enjoy it and stick with it and have appreciation for the classics, I'm going with God of War 2. God of War 1 was fantastic, but 2 just brought it forward even more. It's bloody, it's fun, the quick time events kind of took over for the first time really, 1 and 2. And the storyline's great. And Kratos is still holding up and on the PS4, and he's going to have another game on the PS5. But this is the one for retro gamers to go back on the PS2 and play because the gameplay still holds up and is amazing. And graphically, we're getting to the point where some of the graphics are still actually holding up quite well in this era of gaming. Moving on to the newcomer on the list, Microsoft. Now, Microsoft obviously has a bunch of PC games before this, but we're kind of going with the consoles, and the Xbox showed my doorstep in 2003 is when I bought it, 4. I didn't get it when it first came out, but I got it right after. And if I have to show 2 games for the Xbox, I'm going to go with the classic RPG that I think is one of the greatest of all time. That's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. BioWare did us good with Knights of the Old Republic. This game is fully immersed in Star Wars lore. This is the game that had the craziest plot twist, fun gameplay, memorable characters, and it took place in a galaxy far, far away that many of us would have played just because we're Star Wars nerds, but instead of relying on their past morals, on their past experiences, and their past successes, Star Wars gave us a game that was an absolute banger. And to this day is still one of my top 5 ever, and I'm begging for something new. There was a sequel, and it was great too, but the first one's where it's at. The next one is pretty easy. You probably saw it coming because the Xbox had a few exclusives that were absolute classics, but this one is Halo 2. Halo 1 is the one that really got me into the Xbox gaming because we did back-to-back TVs, Xboxes, and 4-on-4 LAN parties with Halo 1. But Halo 2 is what took Halo 1 and made it better, and that's the one that I would show your friends who want to get into retro gaming, your kids who want to see what the Xbox is all about. Halo 2 is fun, it's co-op, you can play it with your buddies like old school CRT back-to-back, or you can just play the single-player campaign. It still holds up and is still one of the best first-person shooters. And there's a reason at the time when companies were trying to make a Halo killer. First-person shooters weren't called FPSs in the mid to late 2000s. They were called Halo killers because everybody wanted to find a game that could beat Halo. Well, Halo 2 did everything right, and this is the one to check out. All right, this is my last retro console because then we're starting to get the PS3, and at that point I'm not really considering the PS3 and the Xbox 360 retro anymore. But the PS2 and the Xbox and the GameCube, the next up, are still considered retro at this point. Been 20 years. And I'm going to go with Star Wars Rogue Leader. Now I know I said one per franchise, but Rogue Squadron is its own franchise, even though it's in the Star Wars universe. So there's a little bit of an asterisk there. But Rogue Leader was a game that took everything the N64 game did and did it better. Not just visually, just better. I mean, if you wanted to be in the cockpit in the Star Wars universe, this game was amazing, it was immersive, and it was just fun. It just came down to being fun. Now we've got some new games, Star Wars Squadrons on the PS4, the Xbox, but again, this is one to show your retro friends. They got their ideas from the GameCube. Star Wars Squadrons, as good as it is, this originated back in the day on the N64, and the GameCube perfected it. So if you want to play a classic game on the GameCube that still holds up, and you want some friends to convert finally to that retro gaming goodness, Star Wars Rogue Leader is the way to go. And the last one, a game that I have played, not a lot, because I actually don't love this franchise, but I know that it's fun, I know it's great, and when we get together with parties, it's always fun to beat the crap out of each other. It's Smash Bros. Melee. That's right. Probably considered the best Smash Bros. Game came out for the GameCube. How can you not put a bunch of your favorite Nintendo characters together, beat the heck out of each other, and have a good time? It takes a lot of skill, but you can also give someone a controller and let them button mash, and they're still going to have fun. There's been quite a few games spawned from it. Nintendo 64 started it, but this game really did perfect the formula, and moving forward, people still play with the GameCube controller because they played so much of this. So the last game, the 16th for my retro gaming across multiple consoles, is Smash Bros. Melee. There you go, gamers. If these 16 games don't convince your modern day gamers, your kids, or your naysayers about retro games, I don't know what will. Is there a bunch of games I could have put on here? Of course. 2 games per console, almost impossible. But I wanted to pick out games from each console that would go to the masses, that people would play and still say, this game is fun. This game is really fun. And I think the ones I picked out are going to do that. Little survival horror, getting missing, Resident Evil, Silent Hill 2, I get it. But those tank controls, let's be honest, you show someone tank controls today, they're not digging it. As much nostalgia as I have for some of these games, I know that they're not the first one I'm going to go to show someone how cool they were. But the ones I picked, let me know. And let me know in the comments below which games you think you would show to your naysaying friends who don't want to go back to retro gaming. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Keep trolling, keep rolling. We'll see you next time.